You ever hear the Greek myth of Sisyphus? He's the guy in the game Hades with the big musculature and the attractive voice acting. That actually doesn't narrow it down at all. Okay, he's the dude with the big rock. So the story of Sisyphus is that he pissed off the Greek gods a fair bit. So much so that the god Hades condemned him to a punishment in Tartarus, a place the gods used as a dungeon to torment the wicked. In Tartarus, Sisyphus, being the big, strong, muscly man that he is, was given the task of simply pushing a boulder up a big, steep hill until it reached the top. The catch was, though, that the boulder was enchanted, and every time it was just about to get to the top of the incline, it would roll away from Sisyphus, and he would be forced to push it back to the top of the hill from the bottom once more, only for this whole process to repeat infinitely, condemning the man to an eternity of frustration and uselessness which he could never change the outcome of. What has always struck me about that story is the raw horror of it. The task itself seemed strenuous, but ultimately kind of bland and banal. Might take a bit of effort, but pushing a rock? It's not exactly what we think of when we hear the words eternal torture. I mean, it's hardly being chained to a rock and having your liver grow back every single day just so an eagle can eat it from your flesh like the hand your boy Prometheus got dealt. Comparatively, Sisyphus got off easy, right? But something Sisyphus has to contend with that Prometheus doesn't is the hope that he can change his outcome. Every day, he has to put in the effort, work until he's exhausted, try and try and try again, and maybe, just maybe, this time he'll get the ball at the top of the hill, but every time, without fail, it always rolls back. And it's time to start it all over again. Could you imagine that? Imagine just some banal activity, like doing the dishes, or laundry, or cutting grass. And all you need to do to be free of it is to finish the job. But just as you think you've dried your last dish, suddenly there's more in the sink. You clear a pile of clothes, and as you shut the last shirt in your wardrobe, you turn around to find them all dirty on the floor again. And just as you finish what seems like the last blade of grass, the lawn suddenly stretches out further, demanding more of your time and effort. And this is just the rest of your existence now. This is your life, your infinity. Imagine the despair. Anyway, let's talk about the 2009 film Triangle. Triangle is a just truly fantastic hidden horror gem. A 2009 British psychological horror film, and arguably kind of a slasher too, even if it's not what it's defined as online. The movie was written and directed by Christopher Smith, and for my money, it's his best work. The film stars Australian actress Melissa George as a single mother having a very bad day on a boating trip. And now, listen, before I even begin to break this thing down and get into what that entails, you all should know the Triangle is a real head trip. Some horrors want to make you scream. Some want to make you uncomfortable. Some want to challenge your worldview. Triangle wants to make you pull that face of that one Brazilian woman in that meme where she's just looking into space as equations fly around her head. Triangle is a mystery wrapped in an enigma. The film plays out like a puzzle you think you're just about to crack, only for it to unfold onto itself and reveal new layers you hadn't previously considered. It's such a ride, and just moments before it would delve into becoming too strange and convoluted, it wraps everything up with an absolute knockout punch of existential terror that had me thinking about it for weeks afterwards. It's a film that stays with you, the kind that you toss and turn in your mind long after the credits roll. And the more you think about it, the better it actually gets. And unfortunately, this is one of those things that, even by telling you it's a bit of a mind mangler, I've sort of accidentally already spoiled it. Just a tiny bit. Because the movie doesn't initially set itself up to be that. Our initial premise is that Jess, a single mother with an autistic child, is getting her son ready when she hears a doorbell, but no one is there. We then see her arrive at a place called the Triangle Harbour to meet her friend Greg after dropping her son off at school, as Greg has invited her and a few other friends to go on a boat trip. But there's this weird tension we don't necessarily understand yet. Something is kind of off. While Greg and all the other friends seem pretty naturally chill with one another, besides an awkward attempt to pair Greg up with a girl one of the couples invited, Jess on the other hand seems a little uneasy. One of the guys there, Victor, comments that she doesn't seem okay, and she randomly apologises to Greg as she arrives and hugs him, saying that she's just a little tired. Slight oddness aside though, the boat trip carries on as planned and the group heads out to sea. While sailing away, Jess has a nightmare of being washed up on a sandy shore, and Greg questions Victor on what he meant when he said Jess didn't seem okay, to which Victor explains that when he asked her where her kid was, that she couldn't remember, and just blankly stared into space for around 20 seconds before answering, "School." Greg fails to see the problem before Victor points out that it's Saturday and the kid shouldn't be going to school. But Greg explains that Jess's son goes to a special needs school that's open on weekends, and asks Victor to be nice to her. Greg and Jess seem to have a little bit of a connection, and some of Greg's friends are absolute dickheads about it behind their backs. These guys are arseholes, and one of them uses the arseler to describe Jess's son. "I hope you die first, and horribly." Before we can get really pulled into the petty drama of old friend groups though, strange things start to happen. First, the wind drops out completely suddenly, like real suddenly. One minute they are speeding away with their sails, and the next, it's like someone hit a switch that turned off the weather. Then on the horizon, it looks like an absolute monster of a storm is brewing. Greg checks in with the Coast Guard to see if they should be expecting anything bad, but suddenly his radio call to them is introduced by a distress signal of a terrified woman screaming that someone is killing everyone and pleading for help. Her signal cuts out, but before Greg can reconnect, the storm picks up pace and plays hell with their boat, smashing it up and capsizing it, with Heather, the only one in the group besides Jess and Greg who seemed like they might be a pretty chill and nice person, getting swept out to the ocean. The remaining survivors take refuge on the top of their capsized ship, just floating in the sea. And then this is where stuff gets real interesting. An eerie musical cue brings into focus a massive ocean liner in the distance, and as it sails past them, they climb on board to their safety. But something is real weird about this ocean liner. Jess immediately seems to have a sense of unease upon boarding that she can't quite place. Kind of a deja vu feeling. But even without that, there'd still be a dreadful sense of unease about the place, because as the group explore the ship, they realise this massive ocean liner just floating in the sea appears to be completely and utterly empty. Though they seemingly initially saw someone from their vantage point of their capsized vessel, suddenly there isn't a single soul to be found on board. They do, however, find a display case that shows that the ship they're on is really old, like 1932 old, and it's also named the Aeolus, after the Greek god of wind, who was father to Sisyphus. Wonder if that's thematically relevant. Things get even stranger when they hear someone drop keys around the corner of a corridor, and upon investigating this potential sign of life, they don't find a person, but they do find Jess's keys. Like, her house keys, with the picture of her kid attached to them, on this random creepy ocean liner in the middle of the sea. And Jess certainly didn't drop them there, as they heard them drop around the corner while they were stood with Jess next to them. Now, I don't want to go too much further with the plot other than to give you the catalyst of the creepy ghost ship, because I do feel this is really a mystery you should get the chance to investigate and piece together yourselves if you haven't already. But even from this small snippet of information, which basically just covers the first 20 minutes, you can see how well this film drip feeds an increasing sense of unease, eeriness, and intrigue. First, it's a very minor curiosity of, what's up with Jess? Then the circumstances of the storm is really unusual and strange. Then you're thinking who the hell was on that distress call? But before you can resolve the previous matter, the questions keep piling up on top of one another in bizarre and mysterious ways that by the time you're getting to them somehow finding Jess's keys on this seemingly abandoned ship which they've only just stepped foot on, you are like, man, I am so invested. What the hell is going on here? I remember the first time I watched this and getting so intrigued at this point. And as Smith continued to pile on the questions before providing any answers, I grew a little convinced that this was going to be a bit of a Lost the TV series job. and that it was all cool premises to get you hooked, but there was no way these things could pay off in a sensible and satisfying manner. But that couldn't be further from the truth. The film may play coy with its information, but it's not a cheap gimmick. It just knows when to reveal things for the maximum impact, and when to hold back to keep you guessing. It's a very calculated screenplay, one that, without spoiling too much, has already at this point significantly foreshadowed elements of the film that are about to happen, so that when these things do come to fruition, it feels earned, and comes with this satisfying lightbulb moment of, oh, yes, I get it. It's a real enjoyable and meticulously crafted head scratcher that genuinely has you on the edge of your seat as you give it your best Professor Layton impression and try to figure out this puzzle. What's particularly great about Triangle though is the way in which it sells this mystery. The film isn't just a good plot, it's a well-crafted execution of that plot. Right from the opening scene when we're greeted with this eerie music from its incredibly effective soundtrack as Jess reassures her panicked son that things are okay when he threats about something unknown, it's just an immediate sense of discomfort. One that the film holds on to with great performances and slow tracking movement, creeping around yet to be revealed subject matter with the same pace and subtlety that the script does. There's a really competent direction to the proceedings. There's always this sense of unending strangeness, even when things are completely normal, that just makes something feel a little wrong. To give an example, look at the introduction of the ghost ship. By this point in time, the characters and audience should see this ship as their salvation, but the film sells it like their doom. Though many of the characters are elated by its arrival, Jess seems a little uncertain. And it's from her central perspective we see this whole thing play out. One where the ship seems impossibly massive, thanks to its low angling cinematography as it splits the fog and draws closer, feeling like an untrustworthy titan with uncertain intentions. The music is not celebratory, but cautious, a building sense of unease in its every beat. Quite often the sense of something being a little off used throughout the film feels, rather interestingly, incredibly similar to the sensation of deja vu. That feeling we all get at some point that sort of takes us out of ourselves and fills us with the sensation that something being experienced has been felt or even dreamt of before. A feeling that you can't shake even despite the impossibility of that being the case. It mirrors that weirdness of feeling like you're watching a replay of something you did, but that you can't place, and in third person. I'm honestly not sure how the movie maintains this. It's definitely through some combination of its sound, cinematography, plotting and foreshadowing, but even taking in all those factors, it's still odd how smoothly this permeates the runtime. Obviously, it's a horror movie, so it comes with the natural conclusion that something is going to be very wrong, but it's rare that a horror is able to so effectively capture that unnatural vibe, where you can just feel that something is very wrong. And when the wrong things reveal themselves, ho, things are very wrong indeed. It's probably a no-brainer and not even a spoiler to say that it's pretty clear they aren't alone on the boat. I have, after all, already said that this film is kind of a slasher. But the way in which the slasher element plays out is far from your typical kill count affair and is an integral part of the tangled web of mystery that lies at the film's core and branches out into every minute. Again, I know this film came out in 2009, so it's probably fair game at this point, but with it being such a hidden gem and so much of its best qualities coming from the pieces of its puzzle all coming together, I don't want to spoil it. But what I will say is as its components snap into place, there's a real satisfying click to it, where each reveal has this ripple effect into making other parts of the film more interesting, rich and compelling, and the effect keeps stacking. And some of these sequences as well are fantastically well imagined. Once more, not spoiling anything, but all I'm going to say is, Sally, that was really something. If you know, you know. It's so tightly wound. It's hard to talk about without taking something away from your first viewing's initial impact. But thankfully, the movie itself is so good, it's enjoyable and arguably an even richer experience on repeat viewings, and doesn't just rely on the revelations and answers to its questions to be its sole entertaining quality. I will say though, as one last thing before I end for today, that just in case anyone does decide they want to watch this thing, there is a potential content warning for some heavy subject matter. However, in articulating that, it it could also be kind of a spoiler. So if you don't think you need that, feel free to drop off here, but not of course before you consider donating to Trans Lifeline. Remember, all ad revenue, donations, Patreon money and shirt sale profits this month are going to the charity. But if you think you might need the content warning more than you may need the film unspoiled, keep watching. Okay. So just to let you all know, this film hits you with a pretty intense and realistic scene of the abuse of a child with autism. As someone on the spectrum who isn't usually affected by these things, even I have to admit, it took me a little by surprise as the film really blindsides you with it unexpectedly. I don't think it's exploitative or anything, it doesn't get horribly physical and still gets its point across with mostly just shouting, but it is, at least for me, a very uncomfortable scene that, as I know there are at least a few of you that follow me have a neurodivergency much like myself, might need a little heads up on. So just be aware that it's there. Do think the film is amazing though, and that isn't even an in spite of this scene thing. I understand completely why this scene is there in the context of the wider narrative. And if you think you can handle that, this movie is a well-made, slightly surreal trip into what feels like an actual nightmare. One that packs an absolute wallop of rich existential dread into its closing act that will stay with you long after the credits roll. Really great hidden gem with some truly amazing stuff there to discover. And on that note, that is yet another episode of this celebration of horror down. I will of course be back tomorrow with another video, as I will every day this month in aid of Trans Lifeline. So remember to donate if you can, or buy a shirt if you fancy it. Link in the description, profits go to the charity. And of course in non-charity news there's also some other cool stuff going down right now. Firstly, if I'm still in the running for it at the time of this video's release, I am running once again to be this year's Face of Horror, after doing really well in the 2022 competition, but not quite making it to the top. That said, with your votes this year, that could change. You get one free vote every single day, though you can buy more if you are so inclined, and doing so will support the B Plus Foundation in their battle to fight childhood cancer. Link to my voting page in the description. Secondly, don't know if you know this because I almost never mention it, but I'm actually a creative advisor on the next In Search of Darkness movie, which is on sale right now. This incredible horror documentary series on 80s horror films that has featured the likes of industry legends such as John Carpenter, Joe Dante and Elvira herself, Cassandra Peterson, is now making its first foray into the 90s decade with In Search of Darkness 90 to 94. And as an advisor, I can get you a special discount code of 10% should you wish to pick this one up. Discount code and link in the description below. Other than that, you know the drill. Please subscribe to my Only Dans at the red button below. It really helps out the channel. Like and comment with your thoughts, and my Patreon link with a bunch of exclusives is also in the description with all the other cool things. That's all from me, and I hope to see you all again tomorrow.